Hey, it's Levi here, and in today's video we are going to be comparing these two guitars. This one here is an Epiphone Les Paul Custom Prophecy, and this one here is an LTD EC-1000. This one here is made in China, this one here is made in Korea, so both of them are made overseas. And I'm going to be talking about my experience owning both of these guitars, and once I get to the end of the video, I'm going to figure out which one of these am I going to keep, which one of these am I going to sell. So this one is essentially a modern take on the good old Les Paul from the 50s. So with that, we have this big, thick body, the maple top, the humbucker pickups, 4 knobs, and headstock with 3 tuners on each side. From a Les Paul fan perspective, I think this gives you pretty much everything that you could want in a Les Paul. You get the binding all around the body, up the neck, and in the headstock. This is like the 5-ply binding, so you see like the 3 black lines all across the body. Looks really nice. It's double bound because it's a Les Paul Custom. This one I think is really cool. It's got that translucent finish all the way around, so you can actually see the wood grain on the back and on the sides and on the back of the neck. Now that's not super common. A lot of times they'll use solid colors to basically hide any imperfections. Now with this one, you can definitely see any of the imperfections that they may have filled or covered up, which is okay. But that's the reality of having a guitar made out of wood and made on a budget in a factory in China. You're gonna have little minor blemishes and stuff like that. This one has the quilt maple on the top. This is a veneer, so essentially you get the look of maple. Headstock looks nice. This little diamond shaped thing, that's called a stick pin. That's different than the split diamond that they would put on Les Paul Customs. And I previously owned an Epiphone Les Paul Custom, and the center inlay on the headstock was off center. But with this one, I think they did a really good job getting those totally good on center. Now the tuners, for some reason, I've seen on a lot of Epiphones, they just don't line up totally straight. I'm not sure why that is. This is pretty close, but not totally perfect. But, you know, it's kind of like weird little things with Epiphones, you know, that you get. That's saving you effectively $2,500 instead of buying a Gibson Les Paul Custom, which is going to be probably over $4,000. Now the biggest drawback I've got to say with owning this guitar is the weight. And this is kind of a Les Paul thing, right? So some players really dig that heavyweight Les Paul. They want a 10-pound guitar. Now me personally, I teach music. So when I'm working, teaching classes or teaching lessons for multiple hours on end, I want a guitar that's going to be ergonomic, that doesn't take too much of a toll on my body in a night of teaching. Now this one, basically, I can only play this guitar for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half before that I'm getting really sore and I'm like, okay, I gotta put this thing down because it is solid body. There's no weight relief on this. So if you fall into that camp that likes a heavy guitar, this one definitely delivers on that. However, I've gotta say that you'll be able to play longer with lighter guitars because they will affect your back less. The next drawback I have is about the bridge on this guitar. So when I first got it, and I got this guitar used, the bridge felt really sharp, which affected the quality of the experience when playing. So when you're doing palm muting and stuff, and it's feeling like it's digging into your hand and cutting it up a little bit, it's too sharp. It doesn't feel good. So what I had to do there is I filed it down, which helped a lot with that feel. But now it's not all black anymore. Now we have these, you know, silver worn down bits on top of the saddles, which just kind of negatively affects that all black look a little bit. However, I've got to say that the design of the bridge is decent. It's easily repairable if you broke a part. It's easy enough to find replacement parts because this is a very standard tune-o-matic bridge that you see on a lot of lower cost guitars. It's not as good as the bridges that they put on the Gibson models, but it's all right. While this bridge here feels and looks better, it has a fatal flaw where it's prone to failure. If one of these little nuts on the back shears off, you're out of luck. It's not designed to be able to be repaired. If one of those things shears off, you gotta get a new bridge. So it's a bit of a trade-off, you know. This looks and feels a little bit less nice on the bridge, but, you know, it's probably gonna stand the test of time, whereas this one feels and looks nicer, but it may fail if you adjust the intonation while there's tension on the saddle, so be mindful of that. But essentially, this is like your tried and true Les Paul style guitar. This is essentially the real deal, aside from the fact that it's Epiphone, not Gibson. You know, it's a pretty good guitar. I'm pretty happy with it, but I've gotta say that the weight of this thing really makes it hard for me to really want to reach for it and play this guitar every single day. Now with the LTD Eclipse, this is kind of like a Les Paul, but it's a little bit sharper, and I think that this guitar kind of looks a little bit more vampire-y. I don't know, call me silly if you want. I just think like, you know, this looks a little bit sleeker, kind of sharper, but I think from a fit and finish standpoint, this looks and feels like a higher quality guitar. When you really look into the details, I think they've done a really good job of making this guitar nearly flawless, and I've always been happy with the fit and finish of this guitar. So with the LTD headstock, I really dig what they've done. They have an original design. It still has the 3 tuners per side, and I like that the headstock matches the body. It has the same veneer, the same burst, and it just looks great. The LTD's headstock angle is a little bit shallower than the Epiphone's, and they are reinforced with a volute here, which I like. I haven't really had any problems either way. I've never broken a headstock off yet, but I think it's a good design. And all the tuners are dead straight, no problems there. And we got locking tuners that came standard, so I'm a big fan of that. Now with this particular one, I lost one of the little number inlays, kind of fell out. So that's a cosmetic issue, but whatever, it's not that big of a deal to me. One criticism that I've received about this guitar is that the abalone inlays all around are a little bit too flashy. They look like they're a bit overdone. And I think that's a totally fair and valid point. I personally always thought it was a nice and cool look, but not to the point of those semi-disc guitars that are like entirely covered in metallic and shiny things. So if you're not into the abalone all the way around, there's tons of different options that don't have that. I dig that the LTD has a metal jack plate where the Epiphone has a plastic one, which looks cheaper to me. But this guitar, honestly, I gotta say, it's lightweight. It's one that I can play for hours on end, and it's comfortable. They've done these little things like doing a cutout away here and doing a cutout in here that I like. It just makes it a little bit more comfortable. It's not jabbing into your rib cage the entire time when you're playing it. In my opinion, that's the point. That's the type of thing that I'm after. I want to be able to play guitar for multiple hours and not have that many issues. Now, of course, you're always going to have issues because every guitar is a bit body heavy, right? So you're going to be kind of fighting that a little bit. But if you get one like this, it's a little bit lighter weight. I think it's easier to deal with in the long term. Because this body is a little bit thinner, I feel like the high fret access is a little bit easier to reach. It's a little bit nicer. However, I do gotta say, both of them, they still have 24 frets, and you do get pretty good access on both of them. I just prefer playing on this one because the neck joint is a little bit slimmer. Both brands, Epiphone and LTD, have come out with improved neck joints, so they've kind of sanded things down even further to make it even slicker. So that's great, but unfortunately, my guitars, they're not the newest models from this year. This one is actually from 2011, and the Les Paul, I don't actually know what year it's from. It could be anywhere between 2012 and 2016. I don't really know. Now that I'm done talking about what these guitars kind of look and feel like, let's put them to the test and see how they sound in comparison to one another. I recorded all these guitar sounds by going straight into my audio interface into Logic Pro, where I use Bias Amp 2 for my amp sounds. The particular amp setting that I'm using is Mark Holcomb's Haunted S'mores amp preset. It's found on the Tone Cloud. It's one of the first things that comes up under popular. Basically, I just put that on and added an expander just to bring the level up to the point where it's loud. Now, I haven't done any mixing on this track, so it doesn't have a super dialed in EQ. It isn't compressed. It isn't edited. It's just basically like one take playing through the track. I tweaked the sound a tiny little bit, so it felt good when I was playing it, but that was about it. So here goes. Here's the first sample. I personally think that in this case, the Epiphone kind of wins. It's a little bit clearer, it's a little bit brighter, it's a little bit tighter, whereas the Eclipse is a little bit more muddy. Now, basically, these are a result of the active versus passive pickups, and essentially the active pickups were essentially made for this style of playing, so it makes sense that they kind of work right out of the gate a little bit better. So what do you think? I'd love to know your comments and read about what you perceive when you hear these tracks. So for the next test, we're going to do a little bit of rhythm guitar with the neck pickups. Here goes. So in this sample, it's apparent that the EMG pickups in the Epiphone are louder. You get more saturation out of that sound, whereas the passive pickups in the LTD Eclipse are a little bit kind of cleaner. It's almost like you can hear each individual string when I strum the chord, whereas with the Epiphone, with the EMGs, it sounds a little bit kind of bigger, kind of more like a wall of sound type of thing. So this is gonna be a matter of preference. It depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to go for, that you might want those two different characteristics. I personally prefer that glassy character the Eclipse has. However, if I did want a little bit more clarity out of the neck pickup of the Epiphone with the EMGs, I could just turn it down a little bit, and that kind of takes care of a lot of that extra loudness and saturation that you get. So you can kind of balance them out and get a similar sound from that EMG pickup, but you just have to turn it down a little bit. Now in the next test, we use both pickups. Now in a real musical situation, you'd probably be using both pickups on more of a clean sound. So that's what this next test is. So in this test, it's a little bit more apparent, that volume difference that I was referring to earlier. And I've heard a lot of guitar players say that you can't get a good clean tone out of an EMG pickup. And I would have to say that I disagree. You can definitely get some great sounding clean tones, but it's a different type of clean. With this particular example, the clean tone sounds a little bit more rocky. There's a little bit more of that gain distortion behind it. However, the passive pickups sound a little bit more of kind of like your traditional clean tone. So again, it depends on what you're going for. However, I just want to put my hot take out there that you can get a good clean tone from EMG pickups. You just have to turn it down a little bit to get closer to that traditional tone. And once again, I've got to say, leave a comment with some of your impressions on what these two guitars sound like. You know, do they sound the exact same to you? You know, I'd be interested to hear it. But to summarize it all, both of these guitars are pretty similar. The Les Paul is the OG single cut, and you know, it's iconic, it's really cool by all means. The Eclipse is this little more modern variation of it. Basically, Gibson originated this whole kind of style of guitar, and ESP came along many years later and made kind of a modern iteration of it. And then of course, Epiphone came back with a bit of a rebuttal. So this is essentially Epiphone's answer to a guitar like this. Now, which one am I going to keep? Which one am I going to sell? Well, for me personally, this is the one to keep because it's lighter, it's easier for me to play for a long period of time, and I like the way the pickups sound. Overall, I feel like a pretty deep connection with this guitar, whereas this one, not so much, interestingly enough. Now, this guitar is still great. It's an awesome guitar. I'm sure there's plenty of players out there who would definitely take this guitar over this one any day, and that's totally understandable. This is all a matter of preference. However, as we come to this point of the video, I've got to say I'm putting this guitar up for sale. So goodbye Epiphone Les Paul. It has been a good run with this guitar. It has been cool. Definitely the best Les Paul I've owned so far, like actual Les Paul. And that's basically it for this video. So thanks so much for watching, and once again, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be happy to hear from y'all. And if you like my stuff, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you're actually notified of my next video when it comes out. So until then, bye for now, and here's some random clips of me playing each guitar.